I want to take one more opportunity to clarify the timing of Gog and Magog. I realize that there are a lot of people who have a lot of different opinions about this, but the text of Ezekiel 38 and 39 is exclusionary to some of the ideas out there, and so I'm going to go through the different timings that people assign to this and tell you what the text says about those. Specifically, we'll go to the furthest link, and that is linking Ezekiel 38 and 39 to Revelation 20. I call these Gog and Magog 1.0 and Gog and Magog 2.0. Specifically, the differences lie there with the reason that the armies invade. One is to take a spoil, to take a prey. That's Ezekiel 38 and 39. And Revelation 20 is simply to come against the camp of the saints and Jesus. And then God sends fire out of heaven in Revelation 20 to devour them. That is different from the 6 different ways in which the armies of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38 and 39 are killed. Satan is the one who goes to deceive the nations in Revelation 20. And Gog is the one who gathers this army, which is composed of specific geographic regions, which is Persia, the house of Gomer and the house of Togarmah, Cush and Put. Gog is stated to be the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, so there's links to the Black Sea area with that. That is vastly different from Revelation 20's 4 quarters of the earth. Satan goes to deceive people in the 4 quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them to the battle, to come against the camp of the saints in Jerusalem. So there's vast differences there, even in those few different ways. And I actually have a chart on my academia page, which details in several different ways the differences between Ezekiel 38 and 39, Revelation 19, which we'll get to in a second, and Revelation 20. And actually, I will bring that up for you right now. Is this differentiating Ezekiel 38 and 39 from Armageddon and Revelation 20's Gog and Magog? So we'll download that PDF. Here we go. And small, you are not intended to read it on your screen right now. You can go there apart from this video and check it out yourself. But what I have on this chart is, or on this page that I put together, is differentiating the leaders, the parties, the locations, the cause of death, the purpose, the outcome. And then understanding the thematic overview, which is judgment, a separation event, a resurrection, and then a beginning of a new time period. So these are all different. And so in addition to excluding Ezekiel 38 and 39 from being the same as Revelation 20, we can also exclude it from being the same as Armageddon, which is tied to Revelation 19. Again, location, cause of death, purpose, outcome, all of that's different. Leadership, it's all very, very different. So I've got this chart. I'm just going to refer you to this, instead of going through these differences all over again, because again, I have them laid out in a chart. So understanding that it's not tied to Revelation 20 and it's not tied to Revelation 19, then you back up to the next, what people consider a viable viewpoint, and that would be at the midpoint of the 70th week. And yet, Revelation does not depict any such scenario at all. Moreover, by the midpoint of the 70th week, you will have had a displacement of Gog and an emergence of Apollyon, who Jesus is going to do battle with. It's Beast 1, who Jesus tosses into the lake of fire along with the false prophet in Revelation 19. Not only do you not have anything in the book of Revelation which tells you that there's a battle for Jerusalem, that anyone is coming to take a spoil or to take a prey at the midpoint of the 70th week. Trumpet 6 shows the release of a 100 million man army, demonic army. But you're never told that they come against Jerusalem and the camp of the saints. So I'm not sure where people get this idea. Moreover, Apollyon will be the leader at that time. And again, he's part of the reason why you have to differentiate Ezekiel 38 and 39 from Revelation 19 because of different leadership. Well, at the midpoint of the 70th week, he's already there. He will have risen from his holding place out of the bottomless pit 3.5 days before the midpoint of the 70th week. So that excludes it on that principle alone. But moreover, one of the things that we have, and I'm actually going to come back to this, people of the land, that's important, but actually we'll just go to Ezekiel 39 right now, as this ties into a conversation I'm going to have about the people of the land. The direct aftermath of Gog and Magog sees from verse 9 of chapter 39, that they that dwell in the cities of Israel shall go forth and shall set on fire and burn the weapons, both shields and bucklers, bows and arrows, handstaves and spears. They shall burn them with fire 7 years. And then also, in verse 12, related to the burying of bodies and location of bones for burying to cleanse the land, the people of the land will be locating those things for burial for 7 months in the aftermath of Gog and Magog. It says, 7 months shall the house of Israel be burying them, that they may cleanse the land. Yea, all the people of the land. So the reference to the people of the land is to specifically the Jewish people in the land. It's not anyone who lives in Israel will be doing this. It's a specific reference to the people of Israel, the Hebrew people, the Jewish people will be doing this to cleanse the land. And it shall be to them a renown the day that I shall be glorified, saith the Lord God. This is part of the reason why you know Gog and Magog cannot occur at the midpoint of the 70th week, is because it specifically states that the people of Israel, the house of Israel, the people of the land, it's the same thing stated 2 different ways, will be locating and burying bones and bodies for 7 months afterward. That heartily conflicts with the flight of the remnant and the dispersion of people who stay there in the aftermath of the abomination of desolation. The events of the midpoint of the 70th week see the preaching of the everlasting gospel, the abomination of desolation, and the flight of the remnant, and the subsequent killing of those people who do not flee. You can't put Gog and Magog at the midpoint of the 70th week because there would be no one from the house of Israel to bury the bodies or locate the bones, which Ezekiel 39 plainly states they're going to do. Part of the judgment that is wreaked upon the beast, the false prophet, Moab, Ammon, the Amalekites, all of that is because they try to thwart the flight of the remnant, and Jesus is going to make sure that by his own hand they meet their demise. Obadiah talks about this in conjunction with Daniel and Numbers 24. We know that the second half of the 70th week is given to the Gentiles, and they're going to tread the holy city for 42 months. There will still be people in Israel, which is why it's very clear up here relating to the burning weapons of 7 years that it's not the house of Israel or the people of the land that are burning them, not exclusively. It says they that dwell in the cities of Israel. Again, you go to Revelation 11, and it talks about Jerusalem being trodden down of the Gentiles. Oh, this is Luke 21 also, that Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. The times of the Gentiles, the fullness of the Gentiles, the second half of the 70th week, John being told not to measure the outer court, for it is given unto the Gentiles, for the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months. We know that Gentiles will be in Israel throughout the duration of that 7-year 70th week, up to the time when Jesus returns at the second coming to destroy, to stomp the fullness of the Gentiles, to stomp the grapes, the winepress, trodden without the city. That's all a relationship to the fullness of the Gentiles, the times of the Gentiles being fulfilled, whatever. It's very important to note the distinction in language here, that the burning of weapons will be done by those who dwell in the cities of Israel. That's going to include Gentiles, at least during the second half of the 70th week for sure, because Revelation itself tells us that they will be dwelling in Israel. Whereas the burying of bodies and the location of bones to cleanse the land is specifically given to Israel. So that would necessitate Israel being present in the land in order to be able to do that. And we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that from the second half, from the midpoint of the 70th week to the end of the 70th week, they will not be in the land and thus incapable of doing this. So you cannot, based on this, put Gog and Magog at the midpoint of the 70th week. Not only do you have a difference between Gog and Apollyon, but you have Israel not actually being physically proximate in the land, physically present in the land in order to do that during the 7 months they would need to if you put this at the midpoint. So very, very important to differentiate what is given to the house of Israel, also called the people of the land, versus just they that dwell in the cities of Israel. If you look at the composition of Israel right now, you have Arabs, you have Muslims, you have Christians, you have Jews, you have a whole bunch of people. It's not Jews specifically, nor will it be up to the second coming of Christ. So that's important to note. There are yet others who put the Battle of Gog and Magog in conjunction with one of the seals. I don't know exactly why they would do that or why, because I think they believe that the covenant that gets confirmed to start the 70th week is a peace treaty of some sort. And Ezekiel 38 says that they'll be dwelling safely. But the covenant that gets confirmed is not a peace treaty. Seal 2 sees peace taken from the earth, and it's just a misunderstanding of the dwelling safely or dwelling securely. I'm also not sure how those people would specifically lay out the opening of the seals. If it would be immediately after the covenant is confirmed, then Gog and Magog would happen, or I don't know. I've heard some people link it to Seal 2 or Seal 6. I'm not sure how they believe the layout of the book of Revelation is structured, because I've heard people say Seal 6 is the second coming. I don't know, and or I can't offer an educated opinion about what they say, because there are too many people who say varying things about the structure and the layout of the book of Revelation, and I don't know how they see the seals open. What I will say is that we are intended to correlate that 7 years of weapons burning with Daniel's 70th week. I don't know how anyone would get away from that, other than the one other thing I have heard is that people put Gog and Magog 3.5 years before the commencement of the 70th week, because they believe that it's Israel specifically, meaning the Jews specifically, that are going to be burning the weapons. And so because they flee at the midpoint, in order to have 7 years to do that, they would have to have 3.5 years before the start of the 70th week, and then 3.5 years from the beginning of the 70th week to the midpoint, and that would constitute your 7 years. But again, that's unnecessary, because it says they that dwell in the cities of Israel. So we already talked about that. There's no way that Gog and Magog can occur 3.5 years before the start of the 70th week. The whole reason for Gog and Magog is to change the paradigm, to bring Israel back to the God of Israel for the purpose of returning to their Mosaic law and rebuilding their temple, which is the strength behind Daniel 9:27's covenant. So when you get into the reasoning for Gog and Magog, it's to shift a paradigm and to shift a mindset, and then to lead them to facilitate the bringing about of accepting the one who comes in the place of Christ. I don't know if people who are positing this 3.5 years before the start of the 70th week thing, I'm going to assume they don't share the same interpretation of intent, or have studied the intent, the whole purpose, the reason of Gog and Magog. Like, it's not just a random thing that happens. It's purposeful and meaningful. So I have to assume that there's a totally different interpretation of why it even happens and or what the covenant is. I'm just not sure where that even came from. So there are varying different viewpoints about this, but all of them are exclusionary to the sequence of events and the details that were given respective to, say, Ezekiel 38-39, Revelation 19, Revelation 20, and then obviously the midpoint is exclusionary too. Everything other than placing Gog and Magog at right before the commencement of the 70th week is exclusionary for different reasons. So, I don't know whether we'll be here to see it or not, but that is going to be the direct lead into the 70th week. And it is brought about specifically by God. It is specifically timed by God at his appointed time. He's going to bring this about. So there's no point in really looking for a catalyst. The reasoning why these people groups, these nations would join is self-apparent. Like it's apparent. We don't need to guess why Iran or Persia would join in, or why the Northeast African nations would join in, or why Turkey would join in, or why all of these other bands, many people with them. It's a Muslim coalition that comes against Israel. It's a ground Muslim coalition invasion, however you want to say that, of Israel. We don't need to stretch to see how that would, how the little hangers-on would come with Gog at the appointed time. All it needs is God pulling the pin on this and saying it's time, and bringing whatever about that needs to be brought about at the appointed time. Again, it's not a stretch to know that it's in the offing. It's just a matter of when God says it's time and puts the hook in the jaw and bring thee forth. It is God purposing this and choosing the timing for this. And the timing for this is to lead into him presenting himself to a Christ-rejecting and realistically, a God-rejecting Israel in large part, and bringing them back to him, except they accept the one who comes in the place of Christ, and they go back to a covenant that his son Jesus put away on the cross and rose on the Feast of First Fruits to defeat the curse of sin and death of. The law is the curse of sin and death. So there's a lot of different opinions, different ideas. Again, the Bible will exclude all of the wrong things until you can only conclude the right answer. This is a one-time event, happens one time. There's one right answer, one right way. And the goal of mine is to always try to get to what that right answer is and understand why these other thoughts cannot be right, to exclude them as potential, to try to understand what that right answer is. So again, I understand that there are a lot of different people who have a lot of different ideas, but we are very clearly intended to understand that this is supernaturally driven. To what extent the people will be supernatural, who knows? But this is God saying, I will turn thee back and put hooks in thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth. God is saying that at his appointed time, he is going to do this. And the whole purpose is so that the heathen shall know that I am the Lord, the Holy One in Israel. That includes the people of Israel who are Christ-rejecting and God-rejecting. They're not going to accept Christ in the aftermath of this, but they will go back to their old covenant, failing to accept Christ and his new covenant, and they will resume their sacrificial system and rebuild their temple, which is in the next chapter. That is the direct aftermath. 7 years, people that dwell in Israel, not the Jews only, but all who dwell in the cities of Israel, which very clearly we know during the second half will be Gentiles, are going to be able to burn the weapons and will burn the weapons for 7 years. Again, that's commensurate with the 70th week. And we know that for the first 7 months period of time in the 70th week, people, meaning the house of Israel, the people of the land, will be locating bodies, burying bodies, cleansing the land, which is going to be part and parcel with probably Mosaic covenant type statutes, things like that. Probably part of the reason they'll need their temple back is because of purification and all of that kind of stuff, coming into contact with dead bodies and bones and things like that. So that's another reason why the temple is going to be brought about in the direct aftermath of this, is because they're going to need it for purification purposes. So that's just another thing that goes into the reason why it's not going to be a period of years before the start of the 70th week. It's I think there's just a fundamental non-understanding of what the purpose of Gog and Magog is and what it leads to with that line of thought. So, kind of rambling now, but trying to use the direct text of these two chapters to refute wrongness and identify correctness. Not quite sure where some of these ideas come from, because a reading of the plain text will disqualify many of these. The only one I will say that a reading of the plain text doesn't immediately disqualify is probably the one that says 3.5 years before the start of the 70th week. And that's simply because it's a misunderstanding of who dwells in the cities of Israel that are going to burn weapons for 7 years. There's a very clear-cut distinction between how the burning weapons for 7 years is presented and who's going to do that. They that dwell in the cities of Israel is not Jew-specific, is not Israel-specific. Whereas the burying of bodies is Jew-specific, house of Israel, people of the land. And when I started this video, I had located the references in Ezekiel to the people of the land in quotation marks. You guys can do your own study of that, but it helps identify that that is a reference to Israel beyond what we already know from the house of Israel. So, Ezekiel, the people of the land. There are references here. There's a couple in Ezekiel 39. There's one in Ezekiel 39. But there are several in Ezekiel's end times vision. A couple from chapter 45 and a couple from chapter 46. And all the people of the land shall give this oblation for the prince in Israel. The people of the land are going to offer a sin offering. Pretty clearly tells you that the reference to the people of the land is a reference to Israel. So it's important to note the distinction in language and how it's used. They that dwell in the cities of Israel versus the people of the land, or a specific reference to the house of Israel, which is the same as the people of the land. I know I'm repeating myself, and I'm going to assume that the majority of you guys understand this point. But I actually have gotten a fair few questions who have asked me, well, how is Israel going to burn weapons when they're fleeing? They're not. And you were never led to understand that would be the case. It's simply a misunderstanding of who dwells in the cities of Israel. Who will do this for 7 years is not exclusively the Jews. And I think that that leads to some erroneous viewpoints on this by thinking otherwise. So I wanted to clarify that point. And just kind of show you guys how the plain text in multiple different ways is exclusionary to all of these understandings that are incorrect, and how it helps us identify what the correct timing of it is. The closer, I won't even say the closer we get, the more I read this, the more I don't believe we will be here to see this. And not even the closer we get, the more we see world events shaping up. Because I've always said that the rapture is tied to Gog and Magog somehow. And the latest point by which we must be removed is probably when God starts dealing wrath from heaven and starts killing the armies that come against Israel in those 6 different ways. But obviously that's from no reference point at all. Looking at world events when I started talking about this, which was nigh on 10 years ago, obviously the world was not in the same place that it is today. While I don't believe that we should be trying to interpret the Bible based on current events, I think that's a backwards way of doing it. I also think that current world events do provide a little bit of clarity, maybe potentially, with regard to whether the reason this happens or the timing of this is that God brings it about after the rapture of the church. Maybe, maybe not. We'll just have to wait and see. But this is next up on the world stage one way or another. Whether it's pre-rapture or during the rapture or after the rapture doesn't really matter. As far as the world is concerned, as far as global events are concerned, this is next up. No to Psalm 83, no to Isaiah 17, no to Jeremiah 49. I have discussed those at great length. I am not going to talk about them in this video other than to say if you are waiting on those, you are setting yourselves up for disappointment. You're waiting for something that's never going to come. Never going to come before the start of the 70th week. So hopefully, if you guys were looking for clarification, this has provided some. I know it was a little bit run on, but I have gotten a lot of different questions and a lot of different suppositions, and hopefully this has clarified for whoever needed clarification that Ezekiel 38 and 39 is limited to the immediate precursor to the 70th week. Whether that is tied to the rapture, before or after, is not really the point of this. But the purpose of Ezekiel 38 and 39 is to change the paradigm, to redirect Israel's attention to God, and to move directly into covenant confirmation, accepting the one who comes in the place of Christ, going back to their sacrificial system, building their temple, all of that. And again, Ezekiel 39's aftermath about cleansing the land is probably going to play into why the temple goes up immediately, is because of the whole purification part of that Mosaic law. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. But this is probably the last clarification I will do on this, because I don't really feel like there's a point in addressing this again. We are at the point where we just wait and see.